Hey YouTube, welcome back to another video. So today I think I have finally figured out roughly how Caren works. She's been a little bit complicated for me because I've been trying to make sure that I build her correctly, and I've also been really trying to make sure that she is done in a way that actually makes sense. Now a lot of you probably are gonna say, well, just build her like Caren. It's easy to just build her like Caren. If you just build her like Caren, it's totally fine. Well, so before we actually get into Caren specifically, I wanted to talk about the differences between her and Caren, because everyone's kind of used to our defense-based character Caren being really broken in a lot of different scenarios and being really hard to take down. Caren actually doesn't follow the same rules as Caren does, because of a lot of Caren's abilities and passives. So, for example, her exclusive equipment, Burning Fighting Spirit, it reduces the damage she takes while she has increased defense. And she gets increased defense pretty easily. When she uses her Ascending Diamond Fist, she gets that increased to defense for 3 turns. And then when she gets to proc Are You Strong, she's healing and gaining priority. So, and not to mention, she also has a way to recover health and get immortality. So it's a lot harder to kill Caren than it is Caren, because Caren's kit is directly related to surviving, getting the defensive buff, hitting incredibly hard, and not giving a shit about anything that the enemies can throw at you. She's designed to be very bulky. Yes, she is a bruiser, and yes, so is Caren. The problem is that Caren has other skills that are more correlated to surviving and staying around, while Caren has more skills dependent upon healing a little bit, not as much as Caren, getting priority when your team does stuff, stealing buffs from the person with the highest max health, and then also just ignoring their defense. It's a little different. It makes it to where Caren is essentially going to hit harder against those characters with a higher defense. So she's going to be good hitting anything like your Hild, like your Christinas, like your Steropes, maybe your Veronicas. Just kind of going down the list here. Maybe if you run into a K somewhere, your Demiurge Dracons, your Kappas. Those are what Caren's going to be really good against. Caren's just good against anything that's squishy, like your Gnosis Dahlias, your Rays, your Airs, your Gnosis Nellas, your Dahlias, your Demiurge Astes, your Demiurge Vladas, your Valentines. Basically anything that could be considered a squishy, Caren is going to do better with, while Caren is going to do better against things that have a higher defensive base. In all honesty, if Caren and Caren were to fight, if you take the elemental weaknesses out, I think Caren actually beats Caren. Just because Caren is going to ignore a lot of Caren's defense, but Caren's not going to be able to break through Caren's as much, if that makes sense. If those two were to be one-on-one, I think Caren comes out on top, but I'm not sure. Caren does have a lot of ways of being able to stay alive, and Caren does have ways to remove those buffs, but again, those buffs are also team-based. You need a team for that. So I don't know necessarily how that would work, but you can't compare Caren directly to Caren, because while they have the same subclass and everything, their kits are geared and focused towards completely different things. So I just wanted to get that out of the way now before we go into the breakdown, and then everyone is like, well, he's an idiot because, you know, you just build her like Caren and call it a day. You could do that, but I don't think that you would get the same level of I don't think you'd get the same level. Oh my goodness, what is the word? I'm drawing a blank here. The same level of efficiency that Caren does if you just build Caren like Caren. And vice versa. You're gonna build them completely differently. So First off, we're going to get into the skills, work our way through the skills, and kind of just cover them that way. So first things first, we have our S1, Theory Refutation, attacks to enemies. When an enemy is defeated, she heals 20% and it deals damage equal to her defense rather than her attack. It actually does 30% if you get it to level 5. I just don't have it to level 5 yet. Then she has her S2, a passive. After attacking an enemy, she gets 10% priority. If she kills somebody, she gets priority by 20%. And then her triggered effect, when an ally other than the caster performs an attack that targets all enemies, she steals 2 buffs from the enemy with the highest max health and then attacks the target. She ignores the target's resilience, and this again does damage equal to defense rather than attack. And finally, her S3, Final Cleanup, attacks all enemies. This skill's damage dealt increases to defense instead of attack, and ignores 30% of the target's defense. And then when attacking irregulars, completely ignores the target's defense and reduces all skill cooldowns of the caster by 2 turns. She is a chain companion, so you can put her kind of anywhere, and reduces the skill cooldown of Final Cleanup by 1 turn. So overall, you have one skill that's going to heal her a little bit. It also is the burst, reduce critical damage, increases damage, increases pen by 30%, and then as an enhanced attack, increases damage, and then right after using the skill, it doesn't trigger counterattack, revenge, or agile response, which is super nice for PvP. Disassembly analysis is nice because if you can get a kill with it, you get anytime you hit with it, you're getting that priority bump, and then if you're able to get the kill, you're able to get an even bigger priority bump. What's nice is it does have the triggered effect, but it has to perform an attack that targets all enemies. So you're not going to proc it with something like Eternal's S1 or Eternal's S2. You have to make sure you're targeting all enemies, like your Gnosis Nella S2 and S3. And then Final Cleanup is really nice, ignoring 30% of the target's defense. This is one of the reasons why I said I think she would do pretty good against Caren, being able to just ignore 30% of her defense. So this is the thing. I know a lot of people are probably going to get mad at me going into this because they're going to disagree, and I'm all for disagreement. Hopefully you guys don't disagree with me, but we're going to find out. This was one of the characters that I wasn't actually too sure about how to build her, but we're going to find out. But before we do that, we got her exclusive equipment, Logos. Reduces the fire damage taken by 20%, and then ignores 30% of the target's defense when she uses her S1. Oh, sorry, her S2, my bad. So her S2 and her S3 ignore 30% of their defense, which is really nice. Caren, in my opinion, is more of a PvE unit. I have seen her in PvP a tiny bit, but I have her PvP gear on because I've been kind of messing around with some team comps with her in PvP, but more than likely she's mostly used for PvE content. And I'll probably be highlighting her PvE content because in the PvP meta right now is kind of difficult. So, her PvP gear, I'm using 2 defense gear and 2 immunity gear. The reason why I'm doing this is because in this current meta, you kind of need your slower characters that aren't going to be able to go before Gnosis Nella to have an immunity gear, so you don't have to worry about that S3 connecting. It makes it to where she doesn't get stunned by Gnosis Nella's S3, and that's really important to me. There's no point in running Patience gear unless you're going to run all Patience gear, because that's the only way you get the set bonus. So I did the best with what I had, and I used defense gear. If I was going to be using her in PvE, I probably would maybe even consider changing to 4 defense pieces. I don't think Patience gear is all that helpful for her, because you're not going to be getting as much damage resistance and being as much survivability as you would Caren. I think she's going to die a lot faster. And that's throughout my tests, that's what I have figured out. She dies a little bit faster than Caren because she doesn't have a way of increasing her defense and then on top of that also taking less damage. So it's a lot harder for Caren to stay alive in comparison. That's why I just use the defense set, because I want her to be able to do the most amount of damage as possible right off the bat. I don't want to have to wait for her to get to half health and then start being able to do good amounts of damage. See, she even agrees with me. So I'm using 2 defense, 2 immunity. In PvE, I would probably end up using 4 defense pieces of gear. I don't like Patience gear. I don't think she lives long enough for Patience gear. Caren is just a different story because she's able to survive for longer. And her kit complements her ability to stay alive. For her weapon, I just have a Twin B and a Clock Up on right now. These are my best defense gears. But realistically, for her weapon, you have a Surefire Javelin, which isn't terrible. Twin B is not bad, don't get me wrong. Violent Sledgehammer. Violent Sledgehammer isn't bad. It's better for cannon. Again, it increases damage proportional to missing health. And again, Caren isn't going to have that much health all the time. You have Snow White Embrace. Snow White Embrace wouldn't be bad for her in comparison. You also have Phantom Necrosis. I honestly thought about Phantom Necrosis for her, and there's a good reason. If she's going to be getting priority bumps, you can kind of slow her down a little bit if you want to, and it kind of helps you build up that defensive bulk and kind of helps her play like cannon, and then on top of that gives her increased counterattack chance, which would be nice because being able to get that S1 off, again, if you hit something, you're going to get 10% more priority. So it's kind of dependent. If you build her with a lot of speed, then it's going to be a little bit, it's going to kind of hurt you a little bit. But if you build her more on the bulky side, using Phantasm Necrosis, you can kind of get her to play like cannon. I'm going to be toying around with this once I get once I get a defensive focused Phantasm Necrosis, and I'm going to be playing around with it. I'm going to try to do that for my character showcase of her. I'm just trying to get one. I'm trying to get a defensive focused one. I don't have any stones to get a defensive focused one at the moment, I don't think. So if after I test Phantasm Necrosis, I think Phantasm Necrosis is a viable weapon for her if you're trying to get her to play like cannon. And I know a lot of people don't like the speed reduction, but I think it's kind of worth it. I think it's an interesting idea, and I'm willing to give it a try. If you don't want to run Phantasm Necrosis and you think I'm an idiot for that, I would run maybe Snow White Embrace. You could also run Violent Sledgehammer if you really want to. If you want to basically turn your brain off, Violent Sledgehammer is the answer. If you are going to be healing a lot, like you have like a Mava or you're using an Aste, Snow White Embrace is probably better for you. If you're going to be running something like Caren or Nella, I think Violent Sledgehammer is going to be better because you're going to be at a lower HP for a good bit longer. Twin B is also just not bad. I mean, you're getting that crit chance every time you do something. In PvE, that is really helpful because that's essentially, I think it's 20% crit damage when you max it out, or 20% crit chance when you max it out, which if you have 80% crit, you'll be fine. You'll have 100% crit. For her accessory, Death's Hold isn't bad. Increasing that penetration along with her defense ignoring skills, it's not too bad. It's a nice way to stack that up. Clock Up is what I have for right now. You don't need Clock Up. I just have it on her because it's the best defense boosting accessory I have at the moment. Dancer's Bracelet, not great. She doesn't use effectiveness, so it's not really worth using. Glorious Radiance Orb, not bad if you're not building her to crit. If you're building her to crit, it's pretty atrocious because on top of that, you don't have a way to get defensive increase on Glorious Radiance Orb. The next one is a Prima Vista. This one's not bad, especially if you're going to be using Phantasm Necrosis. My only thing is I don't exactly know how it works because it does give a barrier equal to 50% of the wielder's attack. And I don't know if it works for her as the defense because her attack is her defense. I'm not entirely sure how that works. That's another thing I want to test. If it works the way I want it to, Prima Vista is not bad. But for the most part, I think Glorious Radiance Orb isn't bad if you're not going to be building her to crit. The only downside is you don't have a defense focus there. But for all around play, I would probably use Death's Hold. I think Death's Hold's probably the best one to do. Slap more penetration on it, and there you go for PvE. For PvP, it's a lot harder. I mean, she doesn't really have that great of options. I think Clock Up isn't bad because it is a defensive focused one, and if you do get the debuff on her, like a speed debuff, you don't really care too much, because you don't really give a shit. At least the way I would probably use her with Phantasm Necrosis. I really like the idea of Phantasm Necrosis. If you guys can't tell, I've been really waiting for a unit that can use this because I like this concept of doing this. And I'm actually kind of excited to maybe try it out if I can get a good roll. But that is kind of the gear I would use for her. Just to very quickly recap, Twin B or Violent Sledgehammer for her weapon. If Phantasm Necrosis works the way I want it to, that's totally worth using. Clock Up because it is one of the few defense-focused striker accessories, unless you manage to get an Ether Amulet and you don't really care about that secondary effect. Running 2 pieces of defense gear because, again, we don't have as much HP and survivability as Caren does, so you want to get the most damage for your most bang for your buck as soon as possible. Immunity gear for PvP because this is the meta we currently live in. And then finally, if you're actually going to be using her in PvE and you're not dealing with a lot of debuffs and need immunity, you could actually probably end up using 4 pieces of defense gear. If you build her with like Phantasm Necrosis, Patience gear might actually be better. I think if you're using Phantasm Necrosis, you use Patience gear. If you're using anything else, you run full defensive gear. And if you don't really care about the defense and you want her to have more turns instead, speed gear again is always going to be an option for basically any character in this game. Speed is a godsend. It's absolutely incredible. So you can kind of do what you want with that. For stat priority, I think defense is probably your number 1. Excuse me. Defense should be your number 1. I think after defense, it's going to be crit chance. Get that to 100% crit chance. Follow it up with a good bit of crit damage. Then follow up with probably as much speed as you possibly can. If you're running Phantasm Necrosis, you definitely want a good bit of speed because then you'll even out roughly. Make sure you get that accuracy up because I'm running into a lot of units that have really high evasion and is just being really hard for me to hit. Yes, ADHD is a wonderful thing that causes me to zone out at basically everything. It's also a curse. So it's a blessing and a curse. As I was saying, maybe crank up some accuracy a little bit. Make sure you're hitting what you're trying to hit because it's kind of a bitch not being able to hit anything. It's kind of being a pain in the ass. But other than that, that is Caren. She is a very fun character. I like her a lot. She's fun to use. I enjoy her in PvE content. I have messed around with her in PvP. PvP is a really bad place for her right now, especially because you're basically fighting teams that look like this the entire time. Like, this is what you're going to fight, and if you're not fighting this, you're fighting that, and it's just as nightmarish, and I absolutely hate the meta because you essentially just have this or that. And that's really the 2 teams you're seeing right now. It's a little upsetting because I like more variety, but that's all right. We're just in a bad spot. Hopefully the Christmas units that are around the corner being released in the next couple days is really going to help balance out our PvP meta and maybe help us break away from the misery pool that we are currently in. But with that, I'm going to end this video here. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys learned something. If you disagree with me, please let me know down in the comments below. Maybe if you have a different build idea down below, let me know. I'm going to be messing around with Phantasm Necrosis, and when I do my showcase video, I will let you guys know how that's going. Maybe even on that showcase video, if it's working the way I want it to, maybe you'll actually see that build instead. But with that, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.